My name is Ingrid Powell. I am 32 years old. By the time my mom leaned across the white tablecloth at a riverfront restaurant in Chicago and told my 8-year-old loud enough for the whole end of the table to hear Sweetie let Silas blow out the candles, this is for the real grandkids. My fork was halfway to my mouth, and Naomi's face had already fallen. The server stood there holding a tray of desserts. My dad chuckled like it was nothing, and my older sister Candace adjusted the cake so her son's name faced the camera. Naomi's hand slid off the table and into her lap, her shoulders curling in. The whole room buzzed with birthday noise, but all I heard was that word, real. If you've ever sat through a family dinner where someone casually crushes your kid in front of everyone, picture that silence in your own head. Tell me in the comments what you would have done in that moment and where you're listening from, because that night was when something finally snapped for good inside me. A few hours before that dinner, I'd been in our small Logan Square kitchen stirring a pot of boxed macaroni, while Naomi colored at the table when my phone buzzed with the message that stripped away any remaining illusions. My mom had posted in our Powell family group chat about the big Powell anniversary weekend I'd quietly organized for their belated 40th 2 nights at a lakeside resort in Wisconsin, a private banquet room for a slideshow, a boat ride, a charter bus from Chicago, welcome baskets in every room. Just to be clear, she wrote for the slideshow and the formal photos, it'll be Candace's kids front and center. Naomi can sit with you toward the back. We don't want to confuse people about who the grandkids are. My throat burned. I opened the event app, scrolled through the cheerful photos of sunsets I'd picked out, and hit cancel on the banquet room, the charter bus, the boat ride, and the welcome baskets one by one, watching refund confirmations pop up like little explosions on my screen. About 20 minutes later, my phone lit up with a Wisconsin number. I almost ignored it, then answered. A woman introduced herself as Angela from Lakeshore Retreats, politely confirming whether I truly wanted to cancel the Powell anniversary dinner group lodging upgrade and lake tour. Naomi was still coloring, drawing our brick apartment building with Lake Michigan in the background, oblivious to the fact her grandmother had just called her a background extra. Yes, I said, keeping my voice steady. Go ahead and cancel everything under that reservation. Angela hesitated, double-checked the dates, then apologized and confirmed the refunds. When I hung up, I stared at my reflection in the microwave door, hair frizzed from steam and overtime, and realized my parents had no idea their big weekend, the one they were already bragging about to their church friends, had just evaporated. For once, I was not going to fix anything for them afterward. That slideshow text wasn't some shocking departure from who they were. It was just the clearest statement of something I'd been watching in softer focus my entire life. Candace is 3 years older than me, the golden firstborn, the one my parents pushed into honors classes and ballet photos. Then into a picture-perfect marriage in Oak Park with 2 photogenic kids and a Pinterest-ready house. I was the late surprise, the artsy little sister who got hand-me-downs community college, and a lot of, if only you were more like Candace. When Naomi was 5, my mom showed up to Silas's soccer game in a custom sweatshirt with his number on it, brought orange slices for the whole team, and yelled herself hoarse on the sidelines. Naomi sat beside me on the bleachers, swinging her legs, ignored. At Naomi's first school recital, she stood on stage clutching a cardboard star she'd painted in glitter, searching the audience. My parents came late left right after Silas's solo, and in the aisle, my mom hugged Candace and said, "Our little performer," as if there weren't another child in the room. Naomi noticed long before I wanted to admit it. She spent weeks knitting a lumpy scarf in art club as a surprise for my mom, staying up late to weave the yarn with her small fingers. At a family Christmas, she handed it over, eyes shining. My mom smiled, vaguely said, "That's nice." Honey draped it over the back of a chair and then spent 20 minutes squealing over the designer coat Candace said the kids had picked out just for Nana. At Easter, Naomi sat on the floor helping my dad pick plastic eggs out of the living room plants for Silas and little Tessa to find. And when they burst in, my dad barely looked at her, just clapped Silas on the shoulder and announced, "The real hunt can start now." Every time Naomi tugged my sleeve afterward and asked, "Why don't Grandma and Grandpa act like they like me?" I told her they were just busy. Every time the lie tasted a little more sour on my tongue. Somewhere along the way, without ever saying the words out loud, I started trying to buy my way into their orbit. I'm a UX designer for a marketing agency downtown and a single mom juggling project deadlines and L-train delays. But whenever my parents wanted a big family moment, I pulled out my card. Graduation dinners, Christmas Eve spreads backyard barbecues, Airbnb cabins for Powell cousins' weekends. I booked and paid for so many events that Google started autofilling their addresses before my own. One summer, I put nearly $8,000 on my credit cards for a trip of a lifetime lake house rental in Michigan, plus groceries, paddleboard rentals, and matching t-shirts my mom insisted would be adorable for photos. Candace's kids got special goodie baskets with personalized mugs and tablets. Naomi got a pat on the shoulder and one group photo where my mom made her stand at the far edge, almost out of frame. I kept telling myself that if I made everything a little nicer and easier, they'd finally see how hard I was trying and treat Naomi like she belonged. Back at that birthday dinner on the river with the candles flickering and my mom angling her phone for the perfect shot of her grandkids, I watched Naomi shrink into her chair. The server slid the cake in front of Silas, whose name was splashed across it in bright blue icing. My dad leaned in next to him. My mom shooed Naomi's hand out of the frame, and Candace laughed at something her husband Harvey whispered in her ear. Naomi's eyes went shiny, her fingers folding her napkin into smaller and smaller squares until it was just a crumpled ball. I stood up my chair, scraping the tile. "We're going to head out," I said, my voice calm in a way I didn't feel. "Naomi's got school tomorrow." My mom frowned like I'd ruined her shot. My dad looked down at the check, clearly expecting me to grab it like usual. Instead, I caught the server's eye and said, "I'll cover our portion." "Just mine?" "And my daughter's." On the walk to the parking garage, Naomi held my hand so tight it almost hurt, and in the car, with the city lights smearing past the windshield, she finally whispered, "Mom, am I not really their family?" 2 days later, my parents drove up to Wisconsin expecting their big anniversary weekend. And that was when the next wave hit. During a design review at work, my phone buzzed over and over on the table screen, lighting up with my mom's messages in all caps about the resort claiming there was no booking, the restaurant being mysteriously unavailable, and the miscommunication that ruined her plans. Candace chimed in that the charter company had called to confirm the bus cancellation and refund. My dad added a terse, "What did you do?" as if my permanent job in this family was event planner and emergency fund. My coworker Joelle, who sat next to me in our open plan office with her ever-present iced coffee, glanced over at my phone and then at my face. "You good?" she mouthed. I typed back in the group chat, "There must have been a mix-up. I'll check the app." Then turned my phone face down on the table. They had taken my money and time for granted for so long that watching them scramble now felt less like cruelty and more like gravity finally working. After that fiasco, they went quiet for a while, aside from my mom making pointed comments under Candace's Facebook posts about some people not respecting family anymore. Life in my little apartment settled back into its usual rhythm, riding the blue line, helping Naomi with math at our wobbly dining table, grabbing dollar hot chocolate on cold nights after library visits. A few weeks later, though, Candace called and asked to meet near my office. Her voice on the phone had that brittle edge it gets when something is wrong and she's trying to package it as someone else's responsibility. We met at a crowded coffee shop off Michigan Avenue, windows fogged from steam and winter coats. She launched into a story about her event planning studio, Miller & Coter Events, the lofty industrial chic space she'd opened in the West Loop 2 years earlier for Instagram-worthy weddings and brand launches. Bookings had dipped, vendors were being dramatic about invoices, and the bank was getting annoying. When I asked flat out, "What kind of loan are we talking about?" she waved a manicured hand and said, It's just business stuff. Mom and Dad are a little stressed, but we'll figure it out. Maybe you could help calm them down so they don't freak. That same afternoon, when I got home and flipped through the stack of mail dropped at my door, an envelope with my dad's name and my building's address made my stomach tighten. Our last name and city match. So the post office mixes things up sometimes, but the bank logo in the corner gave me a bad feeling. I hesitated, then opened it. Inside were thick sheets of loan documents and bright red delinquency notices. My parents had taken out a business line of credit for $65,000 secured against a two-flat brick rental building they owned in Bronzeville, the property my dad liked to call his retirement nest egg. The paperwork spelled out that the funds had gone to support marketing and expansion for Miller and Cumber events. They were 6 months behind on payments. The bank was threatening foreclosure on the rental if a substantial payment wasn't made within 30 days. I sat at my tiny kitchen table, loan pages spread between the salt shaker and Naomi's crayons, feeling like the floor had shifted again. They had borrowed a small fortune for Candace's business, risked a property we all grew up hearing about, and never said a word to me. I did the math with a knot in my stomach. Between a small emergency fund and extra money from freelance UX projects, I had around $18,000 tucked away. It wasn't much when you factored in Chicago rent, school clothes, and the constant hum of what if I lose my job. But it was something. I called the number on the letter and got a bank representative who calmly explained that a payment of roughly $12,000 would bring the account current enough to pause foreclosure. $12,000 was Naomi's future braces, the difference between surviving a layoff and panicking a sliver of peace I'd scraped together. I stared at the loan papers with my parents' signatures at Naomi's latest drawing of us holding hands in front of the bean, and did what I'd been trained to do my whole life. I tried to protect everyone but myself. I wired $12,000, tearing up as I clicked, confirmed, telling myself maybe this sacrifice would finally make my parents see Naomi as their granddaughter in more than name. A week later, my mom called with a sugary tone I hadn't heard since before I canceled their lake getaway. She said they wanted to celebrate Silas's birthday properly this year, at a family-style Italian place right on the river, and insisted Naomi and I come. "It'll be good for the kids to all be together," she said, as if she hadn't just relegated my child to the back row of a slideshow. Naomi's face lit up when she heard the word birthday, and some stubborn corner of my heart whispered that maybe the $12,000 had softened something. That's how I ended up at that long table overlooking the water candles flickering against the glass. Silas in a brand new jersey, little Tessa twirling in a sparkly dress, my parents at the head like they were hosting a gala. Naomi sat between me and the wall, clutching the small sketchbook she'd chosen with her allowance as a present for Silas, the cover, printed with planets because he loved space. When it was time for gifts, my mom announced that the big ones should be opened first and pushed glossy bags from Candace and my parents toward Silas. He tore through new video game sneakers, a smartwatch, the table erupting in praise after each box. Naomi stood up when there was a pause, holding out her modestly wrapped sketchbook with both hands. Candace glanced over, then said lightly, "We'll open the rest later. Honey, he needs to keep it moving." Waving Naomi back to her seat as if she were a waitress interrupting the show. Naomi froze mid-step, then sank back down, the gift resting heavy in her lap. No one said, "Thank you." Minutes later, the server brought out the cake. My mom straightened up, and that's when she dropped the real Grandkid's line right there in front of Naomi and a room full of strangers. I felt my jaw clench so hard it hurt, but instead of exploding, I quietly asked for the check for just our meals. In the car on the way home, Naomi stared at the untouched sketchbook and asked, "If they think I'm not really their grandkid, does that mean I shouldn't go there anymore?" For once, I didn't tell her she was imagining things. "It means," I said, "some people don't know how to love us, right? And we don't have to keep going back for them to prove it." The next morning at work, Joelle caught me staring at a blank wireframe, my cursor blinking in the corner like an accusation. She's one of those friends who brings extra snacks and zero nonsense. And when I finally spilled everything, the slideshow text the canceled weekend, the Bronzeville loan, the $12,000, the birthday dinner, the real grandkids. Her eyes went hard. They used your money to prop up Candace's business, then humiliated your child at a table you helped pay for, she said. Ingrid, that's not just rude, that's a system. They don't see you as a daughter. They see you as a safety net. She talked about her own cousins who had cut off relatives over less, about how kids learn what love looks like by watching what their parents tolerate. If you keep rescuing them, she said, you're teaching Naomi that being treated like trash is just the cost of being in a family. On the train home, her words echoed in my head alongside my mom's voice, calling Naomi not real, and that $12,000 transfer sat in my banking app like a bruise. A few weeks later, just when I thought maybe the worst of the drama had burned itself out, another envelope with my parents' names showed up in my mailbox. Different bank, fancier logo. My chest tightened before I even tore it open. The language was even harsher this time. My parents had taken out a home equity loan for $110,000 against their townhouse in Skokie, the place with the granite countertops and cul-de-sac my mom loved to show off, and the money had gone straight into expanding operations for Miller & Cosi, events, a second studio space, equipment, ad packages. They hadn't made a payment in 8 months. The letter laid out the next steps: pay a big chunk or face foreclosure proceedings on the townhouse. It was right there in writing. They had doubled down on Candace's dream, put their primary home at risk, after already betting the Bronzeville rental, and still never thought to tell me even while taking my money. I made an appointment at the downtown branch because I needed to know exactly where I stood. A loan officer named Ms. Owens met me in a small glass-walled office. I spread out the letters and explained I was worried my parents might have dragged my name into this somewhere. She took her time reading through the documents, then looked up and told me clearly but kindly that I wasn't on any of the loans. Legally, none of this debt belonged to me. She walked me through timelines. The Bronzeville property was already slipping behind again, despite my payment. The Skokie townhouse was on the edge of default. The bank would move ahead if they didn't receive a large payment soon. They've taken on a lot of risk to keep that business going, she said. And they haven't been forthcoming with you. Hearing it from a stranger made the pattern impossible to ignore. My parents had chosen twice to stake major assets on Candace's studio, while treating my contributions like an endless side fund they could tap without transparency. That night, after Naomi went to her room to work on a drawing of 2 girls holding hands under the bean, I sat on our couch with a folder full of printouts. I pulled bank statements, Venmo screenshots, old emails about deposits I'd made just until you get paid back. With a yellow highlighter, I marked every transfer labeled help with car, help with tuition, vacation deposit, Christmas groceries. The total made my stomach roll. Our upstairs neighbor, Mrs. Delgado, an older woman, who'd once knocked on my door with a plate of empanadas when she heard Naomi crying in the hallway, hummed along to a telenovela through the ceiling. A few days earlier, she'd listened quietly as Naomi chattered about school and promised to come to her next art show like a grandma should. The contrast made my chest ache. I called Joelle again and told her about the Skokie loan. This is what a black hole looks like, she said. They keep hiding how deep it goes so you'll feel responsible to fill it. You can't, and you shouldn't. Your responsibility is Naomi, period. 2 Saturdays later, my doorbell rang just as I'd finished cleaning up pancake batter. Naomi was at a clay class at the Park District, and for once, the apartment was quiet. When I peeked through the peephole and saw my mom's tight mouth and my dad clutching a manila folder, a familiar wave of dread washed over me. I opened the door only enough to step into the hallway. My mom tried to breeze past me with a strained smile, but I blocked her gently, then finally let them sit at my small kitchen table because I wanted witnesses, my walls, my fridge covered in Naomi's art to what was about to be said. They spread foreclosure notices, auction schedules, and dense printouts across the surface where my daughter normally ate cereal. My dad cleared his throat and said that without immediate help, They lose the Bronzeville building and the Skokie townhouse, that everything we've worked for was at risk. My mom jumped in to say they wouldn't be able to host holidays or have the grandkids over if they lost the house, as if losing a backdrop for her photos was the real tragedy. I listened, then asked one simple question. Why didn't you tell me about any of this before my mom said they didn't want to worry me? And then immediately asked how much I could pull together this time, as though we were discussing my credit limit, not my child's security. Something in me finally hardened. I pointed at the loan papers, at the dates, at their signatures. I reminded them I had already wired $12,000 to save the Bronzeville property, once that I had paid for trips and dinners and celebrations for years, that I had just canceled an entire anniversary weekend they were bragging about without even considering asking how it affected my bank account. I recounted in excruciating detail my mom's slideshow text, the lake trip, the scarf Naomi had knitted, and they'd tossed aside the birthday dinner, the real grandkids comment. My mom tried to wave it off as a joke taken out of context. My dad muttered that kids are resilient, but I didn't let them escape into minimization this time. I told them they had built an entire system where Candace's dreams and kids were always the priority, where their properties and status came next, and where I was expected to patch every hole with my time and money, while my daughter was treated like a prop, if that. I said I would not be transferring another dollar to cover loans I didn't take out for a business I didn't benefit from. I said they had proven over and over that saving their house wouldn't buy Naomi a seat at their table or a place in their hearts. My mom started to cry, accusing me of abandoning family. My dad asked where they were supposed to go if they lost the house. For once, I didn't twist myself into their logic. You should have thought about that when you signed these, I said quietly. I'm done being your backup plan. I stood up, walked to the front door, opened it, and told them they needed to leave. My hand didn't shake when I closed the door behind them. After they left, the apartment felt unnaturally quiet, like a machine that had been humming in the background all my life had suddenly shut off. I sat on the couch, shaking, and then the sobs came ugly and uncontrollable. It felt like a funeral and a jailbreak at the same time. When I finally calmed down, I took out my phone and blocked my parents' numbers, then Candace's and Harvey's, then my mom's Facebook account, and any profile that might tag me in their posts. I deleted the Powell family group chat. Later, when I picked Naomi up from clay class and she asked why Grandma had called earlier, I knelt in the lobby and told her in words a kid could understand that some people in our family had made choices that weren't safe or kind, and we were going to take a break from seeing them. But do we still have a family? She asked, clutching the lopsided little skyline she'd sculpted. Yes, I said. You and me. And anyone who treats us with respect. That's our family now. In the months that followed, the consequences unfolded exactly the way the letters predicted. I saw the Bronzeville 2 flat listed for auction online when I was helping a coworker browse rental listings. Later, a cousin texted to say he'd driven by and seen strangers carrying furniture inside my dad's grill and flower boxes gone from the back porch. The Skokie townhouse went next, not in a triumphant sale, but as a stressed short sale that left my parents with almost nothing after the bank got its share. Candace closed the second Miller & Cumberland studio quietly. Vendors I'd met through agency work mentioned in passing that they were considering small claims court over unpaid invoices. One day, Joelle forwarded me a job posting she'd stumbled across from a mid-range salon in a strip mall near Skokie, looking for a full-time receptionist. The contact name at the bottom was Candace Miller. It was like watching the glossy version of their life peel away to show what had always been underneath. Through a cousin who still talks to everyone, I heard that my parents ended up in a cramped 2-bedroom apartment in the suburbs, walking distance from the place Candace and Harvey were now renting. My dad picked up a part-time job stocking shelves at a big box store. My mom watched Silas and Tessa after school, complaining to anyone who would listen that she deserved better after all she sacrificed. Candace bounced between small event gigs and the salon desk, no longer posting sweeping shots of industrial lofts on her Instagram. My parents tried to reach me a few times from new numbers, then through long guilt-laced emails about sticking together after everything, and predictably, about just needing a little help to get back on our feet. I read the first one and then set up filters so the rest skipped my inbox. For the first time in my life, I wasn't tempted to send money or explanations. Their crisis wasn't my emergency anymore. Meanwhile, Naomi and I built something small but solid in our corner of Chicago. I found a therapist who specializes in messy family systems and started going twice a month, untangling the idea that being the younger daughter meant automatically saying yes. I got Naomi into a gentle kids counselor at a community clinic, and slowly she stopped asking what was wrong with her and started saying matter-of-factly, "Some grown-ups don't know how to be nice." At work, I stopped volunteering for every thankless project and started setting limits, which ironically made my boss respect me more. Within a year, I moved from contract to full-time, and then to senior UX designer with benefits that made rebuilding my savings possible. I picked up a few freelance clients, small vendors and artists who needed clean websites and actually paid on time, and funneled that money into a modest emergency fund and a savings account in Naomi's name. We made new traditions that had nothing to do with who was sitting at my parents' table. Instead of big, exhausting holidays in Skokie, we planned city adventures, taking the train to the Art Institute on free days, eating pretzels by Cloud Gate, cheering on runners along the lakefront just because it felt good to yell for strangers. On the weekend, that would have been the Powell anniversary trip. I used a fraction of what that whole resort thing would have cost and booked us one night at a basic downtown hotel with a pool. We spent hours swimming until Naomi's fingers wrinkled, ordered room service burgers in our pajamas, and watched a movie without anyone shushing her laugh. Our upstairs neighbor, Mrs. Delgado, became an honorary grandmother, teaching Naomi how to make arroz con pollo and showing up at her school art show with flowers. Joelle came over for board game nights at our tiny table, laughing loud enough to rattle the windows. The space that used to be filled with dread about the next family obligation slowly filled with people who actually liked us. Looking back, I realized the most important thing I ever canceled wasn't a lake resort or a charter bus. It was the role my parents had written for me as the younger daughter who provides money and labor while accepting crumbs for herself and her child. Cutting them off wasn't cruelty. It was self-defense. They chose to mortgage 2 properties for Candace's business to hide loans, to belittle my daughter in public, to call her anything less than family. The foreclosure notices, the lost houses, the cramped apartment, the receptionist job. Those were just the logical results of their own choices finally catching up, minus my usual intervention. I don't forgive them. I don't wish them well beyond a basic hope that they don't wreck anyone else's life the way they tried to wreck mine. They made their bed. Now they're lying in it without my savings to cushion the fall. Today, my life is not dramatic or glamorous. I still clip coupons, pack lunches, and worry about field trip fees and orthodontist bills. But I also sleep without staring at my phone, waiting for the next panicked message about a property or a loan. Naomi is growing into a funny, sharp, wildly creative kid who no longer scans every room for grandparents' approval because she has learned that her worth lives here in our little apartment with people who choose her. Family, I learned, is not the people who share your last name or send you guilt-trippy texts. It's the ones who show up without demanding payment and who never call your child less than real. I am done giving second, third, and fourth chances to people who never gave us a first. If you hear yourself in any part of this story, I want you to know you're allowed to walk away, even if it's from your own parents, even if everyone else calls you cold. Protect yourself. Protect your kids. Thanks for listening to mine. Now tell me in the comments what you would have done in my place.